Dr. Stumbles, Chapter 1, Interrogation. Once upon a time, at the Santos County Law Enforcement Center, Dr. Stumbles, the clown, entered the building and found his way to the sheriff's office. He waited at the counter until a female officer dressed in a tan uniform with blonde hair and dark pink lip gloss greeted him with a smile and asked, "What can I do for you?" Stumbles held up his hands like he was surrendering and replied, "I am here to confess to a murder set to occur in 4 hours if you don't act soon." This is his story. An officer led Stumbles to a poorly lit interrogation room and was directed to take a seat at a table far from the door. On the other side of the table were 2 chairs for the interrogators and 2 yellow notepads with no pens in sight. High on the walls were a series of cameras set up to record the event, and Stumbles pointed to each one in turn and gave them the finger. The door to the room was locked with a click. 10 minutes later, a male officer unlocked the door and, along with a female officer, entered the room and took seats opposite Stumbles. Both took a yellow notepad and set their pens on the table. "Did you think I would attempt suicide if a pen were left on the table?" Stumbles asked with a snide grin. Ann Perkins, deputy sheriff, replied, "As a matter of fact, yes." Stumbles gave a curious look and replied, "You don't think I could find a way to kill myself with your notepads? Come on, you can do better than that. If I wanted to die, I would be dead, and I wouldn't have turned myself in." Chief Deputy Matt Sanders replied, "I just found out you're a doctor." "Surgeon, actually," Stumbles replied, "but you can call me doctor if you wish. If you don't mind, we don't have much time, so can we cut to the chase?" Sanders asked, "What did you mean when you told the officer at the desk that you were here to confess to a murder 4 hours into the future?" Stumbles looked at his watch and said, "Make that 3.5 now. You've already wasted too much time, and I think at this point there is no way to stop the inevitable." Perkins asked, "Inevitable what? Just tell us what you want us to hear." Stumbles leaned back in his chair and asked for a soda. Perkins responded to the request and left the room to fetch a can from the machine down the hall. "Good. I wanted the bitch gone. Lock the door so she can't get back in," the Dr. Clown said. "I'm not locking her out. She is trained in interrogation techniques," Sanders replied. "Now, please get on with it." "Aren't you going to read me my rights?" Stumbles asked. "We have no evidence a crime has been committed, so no, we do not need to read you your rights." "You will wish you had," Stumbles replied, as he sat up and scooted back in his chair, and with pride stated, "I placed a bomb on Flight 2621 from Washington, D.C. to Beijing, China. And it's set to explode in a little over 3 hours." "How did you manage to do that?" Sanders asked. "It's almost impossible to place a bomb on a plane these days, and since you are obviously not on the plane, I don't see how you could have. Is this a hoax?" Officer Perkins entered the room and set a root beer in front of the clown and sat down. "Did I miss anything?" Sanders looked to Perkins and replied, "This clown said he placed a bomb on a plane heading to China, and it's going to go off in less than 3 hours. Stumbles looked to his watch again, shaking his head in frustration. "Make that 2 hours and 55 minutes. "Please explain to us how you managed to place a bomb on the plane," Sanders asked. Stumbles took a sip of his soda and replied, "Well, as we have already established, I am a surgeon. And as a surgeon, I open up bodies to perform surgeries. I came across a referral from Senator Gail Hemsworth and immediately jumped at the opportunity to perform her gallbladder surgery." Sanders spoke up, "I think I know where this is going." "Please do not interrupt me again," Stumbles said. "Now I did some research on the senator and found out she was going on a fact-finding mission to China today. So I took the opportunity to place a small bomb in her chest cavity that was set to go off mid-flight." Perkins spoke up and said, "I had my gallbladder out 3 years ago, and the procedure was done laparoscopically. They made 3 incisions and never cut me open. I fucked up the laparoscopy on purpose, so I would have the opportunity to cut her open. Wasn't hard, and this is the kicker," Stumbles said with a shit-eating grin. "There is a chance to save the plane, but it would require that one of the passengers cut her open, remove the bomb, and enter a code on the interface that I would provide." "What are the chances you would follow through with the code?" Sanders asked. "Good question, officer," Stumbles replied with a smile. "You'll have to take my word on it." "And what do you expect them to cut her open with?" Sanders asked. "TSA doesn't allow knives on board airplanes," Stumbles said. "They can use a fucking butter knife for all I care. I'm giving the passengers an out." Perkins asked, What happens to the senator? I looped a shackle around her descending aorta and locked it. The only way to remove the bomb would be to cut the artery, which would result in her bleeding out rapidly and ending her life. The only way the passengers will survive would be to kill the senator. Why didn't you just kill her on the operating table? Perkins asked. Stumbles replied, I thought about it quite a bit, but once I found out she was on a 16-hour flight to Beijing, China, I couldn't pass up on the chance to create an international incident that would cement my place in history and end the life of an enemy of the people. Perkins followed up with, What's your beef with the senator? Instead of asking me more stupid questions, Missy, maybe you should get on the phone and alert the airlines. Don't you think? Stumbles asked. And what's up with your ridiculous ponytail? What are you, 12? No wonder no one takes you female cops seriously. Pissed, Officer Perkins took her notepad and rushed out of the room to make a call to the airport with her ponytail bobbing up and down as she ran. Sanders followed up with, You are one sick fuck, you know that? Answer her question. I don't talk politics. Stumbles replied. So you don't agree with her policies, and for that you want her dead? Stumbles shrugged his shoulders and said, If they don't get that bomb out, her entire entourage is also going to die, as well as 3 other senators, 2 of whom are as bad or worse than she is. Either way, I kill that bitch, or I get them all. Pray there's a doctor on board. Chapter 2, Flight 2621 to Beijing. Captain Steve Nelson received a message on his headset about the bomb threat. He acknowledged the message and called for his lead flight attendant, Judy Sloan. What's going on? The co-pilot asked. We got a bomb on board, Nelson replied. He punched a cone to release the cockpit door and heard a knocking. Come in, he yelled, and Judy Sloan entered. Do you know if we have a doctor on board? Nelson asked. Yes, she's around row 20, aisle seat, Sloan replied. Nelson asked, See if you can get her up here. I need to speak with her. Just tell her we may have a medical emergency. I'll talk to her, Sloan said, and headed back to find the doctor. The co-pilot, Alan Johnson, asked, Did they give you any information? The type of bomb? They told me to find a doctor first, Nelson replied. Why a doctor? Johnson asked. Just then the doctor stepped into the doorway. I hear you're looking for a doctor. Is there something I can help with? Dr. Reel asked. Captain Nelson spoke into his headset and relayed to the tower that he had found a doctor and said her name. He asked Dr. Reel to close the door and pressed a button that routed the radio's sound through the cockpit speakers. Go ahead, Nelson said. We are alone. The sound of a man's voice came over the cockpit speakers. Hello, my name is FBI Agent Hendricks, and I am with Dr. Lance Poole. We need to relay to you a possible resolution to the bomb threat you are now facing. Are you all able to hear me? Yes, we hear you, Dr. Reel replied. Perfect, Hendricks replied. I will let our doctor explain. This is Dr. Poole. What is the name of the doctor you found on board, and what type of practice do they have? Dr. Poole asked. My name is Dr. Emily Reel, and I work in a clinic, Dr. Reel replied. Do you have any surgical experience? No, Dr. Reel replied. There was a pause as Dr. Poole and Agent Hendricks conferred with each other. What's going on? Captain Nelson asked. He was getting perturbed at the cloak and dagger talk. I apologize, Dr. Poole replied. There is a bomb located inside Senator Gail Hemsworth. She had gallbladder surgery 2 days ago, and the surgeon placed a bomb in her chest cavity, set to go off in approximately 1 hour. Oh my God, Dr. Reel replied. What do you expect me to do about it? There's more, Dr. Poole replied. Part of the bomb is locked around her descending aorta, which makes this very complicated. To remove the bomb, you will have to sever the artery. Once you have removed the bomb, you will bring it to the cockpit, and we will give the terrorists the numbers printed on the side, and then they will send us the code to disarm. Dr. Reel replied, Why can't we put the code in while it's still in her chest? I have no fucking idea, Nelson replied. They won't give us the code we need until we give them the numbers they require. Dr. Poole said, The bomb has an interface like those new diabetes monitors. If they get out of range, they signal. According to the information relayed to me by the terrorist in custody, the bomb will remain live as long as it detects a heartbeat, so you are forced to cut the artery and let her die before he will provide the cancellation code. Dr. Reel asked, I'm not cutting open anyone. I'm not a qualified surgeon, and I'm not going to be a pawn for a terrorist to commit murder. If you don't cut the artery and bring the bomb to me, we will all die, not just her. 458 lives are at stake, Nelson said in a raised voice. You cut her open. Reel yelled back, I'm going back to my seat, the doctor replied. Chapter 3, Senator Gail Hemsworth. Obligated to save the passengers, Captain Nelson placed the aircraft on autopilot, found a pair of scissors in the galley, and headed down the aisle to row 20. When the pilot arrived at the senator's seat, he pulled the scissors from his back pocket and stabbed her in the right chest, puncturing her lung. "What are you doing?" the male passenger in the center seat yelled as the pilot pulled the scissors out of the senator's chest for another attempt. The passenger stood up and pushed the pilot backwards, knocking him off balance, sending him to the floor. "If you don't let me kill the senator, you will all die," the captain yelled as he stood up. "She has a bomb." The cabin erupted in a volley of screaming and yelling at the revelation that there was a bomb on board. Confused, the passengers didn't know if the pilot was crazy because he attacked a female passenger with scissors, or if he was telling the truth and trying to save them. "The bomb is inside her, and if I don't get it out in the next 20 minutes, it will go off," the captain yelled. "Now, somebody give me a hand." The senator gasped for breath as her right lung collapsed into a hemothorax, and blood filled the space between her lung and her chest wall. "You can't kill her," a passenger called out. "That's murder." The passengers backed up enough for the captain to pull up the senator's shirt, revealing a row of stitches from the gallbladder surgery. That sealed it for him that the threat was real. He used scissors to remove each staple, then used a single blade to cut along the original incision. The passengers watched in horror as the captain reached into the wound and felt around for the bomb. Blood oozed out of the surgical incision and ran down the seat onto the floor. "I found something," he yelled and tugged on the hard object he located in the senator's chest cavity. "It won't move," he yelled, and then felt the artery the bomb was attached to. By this time, the senator had passed out from blood loss and was staring blankly at the cabin ceiling, but her heart was still beating. "Does anyone have a pocket knife?" he asked. "I got one," a man called out from the crowd and handed it to the captain with the blade exposed. "How did you get this past the TSA agents?" "It's all plastic," the man replied, "but sharp as hell." The captain, still holding the bomb in his right hand, used his left hand to cut the artery with the plastic knife. He was surprised at how easily and quickly the vessel was severed, and how easy it was to remove the bomb from her chest. The wound was now gushing blood like a fountain, but was now free of the bomb. "Got you, you son of a bitch," Nelson yelled, and pushed through the crowd, heading down the aisle to the cockpit to communicate with Dr. Poole with the bloody bomb in his hand. Captain Nelson arrived at the cockpit, entered the doorway, and sat in his captain's seat, smearing blood all over everything he touched. "I have the bomb," Nelson yelled as if he had just made a last-second field goal to win the big game. "Flight 2621 to Washington Tower, do you copy?" Captain Nelson asked in desperation. "I see something blinking," the co-pilot yelled. "Wipe the blood off and see what it says." Nelson wiped the blood away, and in small digital numbers, read the countdown. "We have less than 5 minutes. Then he noticed there was no place to enter a code, with only the digital clock counting to 4 p.m. Then it began to vibrate and beep in a rhythm reminiscent of a heartbeat. "They lied to us," the captain yelled. "I cut the bomb out of her for nothing, and we're still going to die." "Don't be so sure," a low booming voice called out. Both pilots turned to see a tall, rugged-looking Catholic priest standing in the doorway, dressed in full cowboy gear, with a priest collar and a 9-inch silver cross dangling from his neck. He had a 3-day beard, wore a cowboy hat, a leather vest, and a full-length cowling that almost touched the floor of the plane. "The Lord will find a way," he added, and held out his hand for the bomb. Chapter 4. Father Xavier Dynamite. "Who are you?" Captain Nelson asked. "And what are you going to do with the bomb that we can't do?" "The Xavier Dynamite, and according to the countdown clock, you have less than 2 minutes before the bomb explodes. So hand me the bomb, or prepare to die." All out of ideas, Captain Nelson handed the bomb to the priest, who squeezed it in his right hand and made the sign of the cross with his eyes closed. He muttered a few words no one could understand, held his arm out, and opened his palm. To everyone's shock, the bomb fell to the floor and bounced under the co-pilot's seat. "What the fuck are you doing?" Nelson asked in disbelief. "Pray," the priest said with confidence. "Pray." Nelson leaned over in his seat, over the plane's throttle control, and scanned for the bomb hiding under his co-pilot's seat. He found it, but it was just out of his reach. As if by habit, he looked at his watch to see the time, then realized he hadn't set a countdown, so the time on the watch had no real meaning. "Now we're fucked," Nelson yelled, and leaned back in his seat, awaiting his fate. Just then, a loud pop was heard from under the co-pilot's seat, and the cockpit shook for a moment. Some light smoke filled the cabin, and the co-pilot was dead, but the plane did not tear itself apart. "See, the Lord provided," the priest said confidently. "Alan Johnson, my co-pilot, is dead," Captain Nelson barked. "A small sacrifice in exchange for the lives of the passengers," Father Dynamite explained. "Jesus did the same when he hung on the cross." "You're comparing Alan to Jesus?" Nelson asked. "That would be absurd," the priest replied. Just then, Captain Nelson saw a red light blinking on his control panel, followed by an electronic voice that called, "Pull up, pull up, pull up." The captain looked out the side window and saw that he and the plane were nowhere near the ground and wondered why the alarm sounded. What the fuck is going on now? Then, more alarms sounded, and the lights on the digital readouts flashed before him. His stick began to shake, and the plane banked to the right. Then he received an alert that his right engine was on fire, and the plane dipped at a 30-degree angle. "What is going on?" the priest asked. "You tell me," Nelson said, trying to keep his cool. "You're the one with the phone line to God. Maybe you should pray our way out of this before we slam into the ground at 600 miles an hour. Pull up, pull up, pull up," came across the cabin speakers again, and then everything went silent as the control panel shut off and the monitors turned black. The ground grew closer and closer out the front windshield, and Captain Nelson prepared to be crushed by the mass of the plane behind him as it compacted tail to nose in less than a tenth of a second. He knew he would feel no pain, but the thought of dying took his breath away.